Hello, everybody. I decided to make a new recording for this so that everybody would have an idea of kind of what was going on in Everyman and get a better understanding of what allegory is, especially in the medieval period. But even the truth is the word allegory as we use it today is pretty much the same. It's essentially what an allegory is an extended metaphor. So in an allegory, every single, well, not everything, but most of the items, either characters or even physical objects within a story or a play, stand for something. And they usually stand for something bigger. Now, sometimes it's literally apples for apples. So in this case, for instance, it's really easy for a medieval audience who was, remember, largely illiterate to understand exactly what's going on because all of the people are named for stuff they actually are. So Everyman, for instance, is every man. He represents all of us. Now we have other Everymans. For instance, there's a short story by, what's his name? Suddenly I can't remember. But it's called it's called Young Goodman Brown. And the story is actually by one of my favorite authors. He wrote the Scarlet Letter, Hawthorne, Nathaniel Hawthorne. But in Young Goodman Brown, his name is Young Goodman Brown. It's kind of like Brown is one of the best, like most common names we have. Smith and Brown are kind of interchangeable with that. That's why one reason why we have court cases that are called Brown versus the Board of Education or Smith versus Smith, because when they're using a fake name, they use one of those common names. And so in this case, though, with young Goodman Brown, he represents all of us. So what happens to young Goodman Brown is he's married to a woman named Faith, and he leaves Faith one evening and he's going to go into the woods. She doesn't know where he's going, but she begs him to stay. And yet he leaves her behind. And this is representative of the exact thing. He's leaving his faith behind. And he actually meets with a man who has cloven hooves, well, the hooves of an animal, at least at some point. He's carrying a staff that turns into a serpent. And he has all the other signs that say that he is Satan. And so he meets with Satan, and Satan tries to win him over to his side in the story. And at one point, he's actually going to be brought into the group of other Satan followers. And he thinks that there's a veiled woman in front of him who's also going to be initiated, and he thinks it's Faith. He sees a pink ribbon in her hair, and he thinks that's who it is. And so he says, turn away from them, Faith, like that kind of thing. And then everything is whooshed away. And then he returns home, and his wife is there to greet him. She's so grateful to see him. He thinks, though, that she's been taken over by Satan. And so he loses his faith, or he rejects his faith. And for the rest of his life, he's a miserable man because he distrusts everyone around him. He thinks they're all in league with Satan. And yet the reality is Satan may very well have tricked him into all of this. We have no idea that any of it was real because Satan is the great deceiver. And so in the end, his mistrust means that he's never in communion with his other people. So he turns his back on mankind. He turns his back on his faith and everything. But that's all allegorical. So it's this physical representation of a much more spiritual journey, and one that applies to everybody. So Everyman, in this case, was an allegory because the figure, the person who plays him in the play, is actually representing every single man or every person, because we all at some point in our lives will die. And then when we do, this is a kind of what do we try to do? How do we bargain with death? How do we try to make it so that we're not going alone? And yet we have to go alone. We can't take our relatives with us because then they would die too. Our friends can't go with us because they would die too. And so we have no choice, and they don't want to go with us. They don't want to die either. And so it's kind of a process by which every man realizes what he can't take with him. And a lot of it includes things like worldly goods, the fact that he even tries to get his stuff to go with him. It's translated in here, it says goods, but it's really usually worldly goods. It's specifically, your wealth. And so you could certainly translate it into that as well. So But this is very much, it's a rather short play. To actually put it on takes about 45 minutes. And yet it's designed to be a very much a moral allegory to essentially teach the people who are watching, hey, watch out what you do during your life, because the only thing you can take with you are your good deeds. Now, this is pre-Protestant, so this is going to be, I mean, it's very much along the Catholic doctrine where what you do on earth absolutely matters. There is no such thing as grace. It's and we can look at where does he get at the end, but essentially, there's not much you can take with you when you actually do die. So first, though, the messenger says he's doing the kind of forward. He comes in, he goes, hey, no, be patient. Please watch what happens. This is a moral play, and it is. It's a moral allegory. The summoning of Everyman is what its actual title is. It just says Everyman here. And different, there are only a couple of copies that we have of this, but we know it was performed quite a bit. And it was, the church condoned the use of it because it had such a moral and very religious significance. So they would allow people to perform inside the church as long as the plays were religious. But even the plays outside the church, a lot of the plays were very short minute plays put on, and they were in a series of plays that were put on usually by craftsmen's guilds. They would take up the parts in each of the 10-minute plays. But they all, some of them were miracle plays where they went through the whole the end of Christ's life and showed, how he was risen from the dead. But it would be little stages in that the passion. Actually, they were passion plays. The miracle plays were of his birth, but they had ones that were kind of about Armageddon and Jesus facing Satan and defeating him in the end. So but they were all religiously based, or they would never have been allowed to be performed. And remember, this is in Europe, so this is almost exclusively Catholic. So there is no other types of Christianity. The only other type that has any sort of leeway at this time is the Greek Orthodox Church. And they are also very like the Catholic Church, except they use a Greek text. In this case, though, the whole point of this is to tell us, hey, watch what you're doing now, because there are only so many things that you treasure now that you can take with you. And most of them you can't. So it's not a super happy way, because what does it end with? It ends with him being taken by death down into through a trap door and into his grave. So, but he is at least at peace because he's taking his good deeds with him, that by which he will be judged. So, but essentially that's kind of where it's going. And it goes through it tells you what it's going to be about. And that he's going to have to face his death and then figure out, he has and it says a reckoning of every man's person. So he's essentially saying every man, this is a character who's representing every one of us. And so he says, be careful, because it says if I leave, it says but it's and that means if, and I leave the people thus alone in their life and wicked tempests, verily they will become much worse than beasts. So essentially it's saying that people, when they don't think about heaven, don't think about what their reward will be, may turn evil. And they're not going to do the good things that they should be doing. And so, and this messenger is really, very quickly, he starts out what this is going to be, and then this is God. Now, I did put another recording in there right underneath this one, and that recording actually has a staged play by I think it's an Oregon community college that put it on, and so you can kind of see how it's staged. But you will notice that God, for instance, his voice is all you hear, and it's a male and a female kind of interchanging some of these lines, but you don't ever see any vestige of God, and that would be typical, because God's just going to be a voice kind of overhead to add to the majesty. Remember, God is not someone that we tend to look at, and so. But he expresses hope. I hope well that every man in my glory should make his mansion. So, God's glory. But every man isn't just the one person. Of course, he represents everybody. Now here comes death. And he says, Almighty God, I'm here at your will, your commandment to fulfill. By Catholic doctrine, death was formed when sin was begotten. So when man ate the apple, that's when death began. And so he actually was he became a deity kind of formed. That's Catholic, So and he's the guy with this. Yes, you could stage it where he has, has a skull face and he's in a black robe with a scythe. I mean, you could absolutely stage it that way if you wanted to make it clear, because you want to make it absolutely clear who that guy is. Okay, so death comes up. I'm here at your will. What do you need? And God says, go you to every man and show him in my name a pilgrimage he must on him take, which he in no wise may escape. In other words, tell him it's his day of reckoning and he has to come to me. Now, what does that mean? Go tell him, of course, it's death. So go tell him he's going to die. And he says, okay, I will go. And he says, I will in the world go run over all. In other words, death comes to everybody and cruelly outsearch both great and small. Every man will I beset that liveth beastly out of God's laws and dreadeth not folly. He that love riches I will strike with my dart, his sight to blind and from heaven to depart. So whether he's going to go to hell or to heaven, death will come for every man. But at that point is that day of reckoning. When you have done all your sinfulness and everything, when you get to that point where you die, then everything is back on your head. And so is he going to go to hell forever? Or is he going to go to heaven? And it says, yonder I see every man walking, full little he thinketh on my coming. He's not thinking about his future. He's not thinking about heaven or hell. He's thinking on fleshly lust and his treasure. And that's not a good thing. So he's thinking, wow, I've got wealth, yay. And lust. And it could be lust for actual physical contact, like the traditional lust we think about. It could be lust for food. It could be, lust for other people's stuff. It could be, there's lust can be interpreted. Don't assume it's sexual. I guess I'll put it that way. And so he sees every man. He goes, every man stand still. Where are you going? Have you forgot your maker? In other words, God. And he goes, why are you asking me that? And he says, well, let me show you. God has sent me to you. In great haste I am sent to thee from God out of his great majesty. And everybody's like, what, me? Like it's a shock. Now, death comes unexpectedly. It's funny because that's such a trope for a lot of kind of fire and brimstone preachers, or at least it will be in 17 and 1800s. And yet it absolutely takes us by a shock. Very few people see their death coming. Most of them don't have much time to plan. They might have a few days or months, or some of them it's just a shock, but either way, it's a shock for him now. But he says, what, me? And he goes, yeah. He says, now you've forgotten God, but he's been thinking about you up in heaven. And, so I need to send this message to you. And he goes, well, what does God want of me? And he goes, I'm going to show you. And then he says, a reckoning he will needs have without any longer respite. So it's your day of reckoning. And we even call it that, the day of reckoning. That's the day where everything's over. And he goes, no. A longer leisure I crave. It's really hard for me, so I need more time. And he goes, oh, no. You don't get to do that. And therefore thy book of count with thee thou bring. In other words, you're essentially going to tell me, what is it that you have done? But your book of count. For turn again you cannot by no way, and look thou be sure of thy reckoning. So you're going to answer to God for everything you've done, for your many bad deeds and good but few. You're going to actually answer to God. It really is. It's the day when you reckon through all of the things that you've done, good and bad. And he even says, mostly bad, but some good. And Everyman says, but I'm not ready. And he goes, how do I even know you? And he goes, oh, I'm death. So in case anybody missed it at that point, he gets to tell him, oh no, I'm death. And everybody's like, ooh. And it is kind of freaky. It's sort of scary. So a lot of people in the audience would probably be like, shivery, especially the little kids. And yes, there would be little kids watching this story. Absolutely, because it was considered to be a very moral story. Kids need to hear it. And he says, and Everyman says, oh, death, thou comest when I have thee least in mind. Like I wasn't even thinking about death, but death comes unexpectedly. And he says, can if I give you £1,000, can we wait until another day? And death is like, no, money doesn't mean anything to me. And he says, not only do gold, silver, and riches not matter to me, but I don't care about the Pope, the Emperor, the King, the Duke, or princes, because guess what? No matter what rank you have in life, you still die. And you die when it's your time to have your day of reckoning, not when you're ready. And he says, nope, I give thee no respite. Now, he's not like angry, but he could be a little, like, come on. And Everyman's like, really? I didn't get any warning. He even says, I may say death giveth no warning. Well, he doesn't. Remember, death comes unexpectedly. And he says, he goes, please, just give me some more time. And he goes, nope. He says, you can cry, weep, and pray. Doesn't make any difference. The answer is no. You have to get done. And you must. And it says, for Adam's sin must die of nature. In other words, death, remember, I said death came from sin. With the advent of sin, once the apple in the Garden of Eden was eaten, death is, Adam and Eve can no longer live forever. They will die. And so he goes, okay, well, if I take the pilgrimage, and he says, show me for Saint Charity, should I not come again shortly? In other words, but then I can come back, right? And he goes, no, once you're dead, you don't get to come back. You will never come here again. He's like, but I need mercy. So he's begging God for mercy. Can I have no company in this travel from earth and going into, the afterlife? Or anybody that I know, can't they go with me? And he goes, if anyone's willing, like he says, if any be so hardy that would go with thee and bear thee company, sure. If somebody's willing to go with you, sure, whatever. And he says, do you think that your life is given to you along with your worldly goods? And he goes, no, I know it's only lent. And he says, it was but lent thee. And then you will not keep your life forever. But all of this other stuff, you'll see. But the only time someone can go with you is if they do it willingly. And he says, you're mad. You have your 5 wits about you, the 5 senses. And here on earth, there's nothing that you can do to amend your life because I've come suddenly. You're done. You are so done. And he's like, no, I don't want to go. He's doing the bargaining with, if you think about the 5 stages of grief, one of them is bargaining. He's like, no. Just spare me till tomorrow. And he goes, no man will I respite. So no, you don't get any leeway. Death comes and you're just done. And it says, to the heart suddenly I shall smite. And you think about people who have a heart attack. People are in a car crash. It just happens. They're done. And it's not meant to minimize death. If anything, it's meant to pound it into our heads. Hey, death is gonna come. Be aware. Be ready. Don't forget God, And now Everyman says, oh, I wish I'd never been born. Literally. And he's afraid of, what he's done. He's afraid of where he's going. He doesn't want to go, and he says, to whom were I best make my complaint do make? So who am I supposed to complain to? This is just a mess, but then he says, so essentially he's like, okay, maybe some of my friends can go with me. And then he says, I see him yonder. This is fellowship. So these are all his friends and stuff. I trust that he will bear me company. So if I tell him, hey, I've got to die and go to my reckoning, he'll come with me, right? And so he says, well, not good fellowship. Now, fellowship is a person, and yet he represents friends and the people that he knows and stuff like that. And he says hi to him and he goes, "Yay, but why do you look so pitiful? Like, sir, why lookest thou so piteously? Is there anything wrong? Is there something I can help you with?" And he goes, yeah, actually, I'm in great jeopardy. He goes, "Oh, I will not forsake you until my life's end in the way of good company. I'll keep you company." He goes, "Oh, wonderful." And he says, so what's the problem? "If any have wronged you, ye shall revenge be." So he offers him revenge. He even says he'd slay somebody for him. And he says, "Well, that's wonderful." And so he says, "Tell me your grief." And he says, "Well, okay, then let me tell you what's going on." Kind of hems and haws a little bit. He goes, "You've been a really good friend." Okay, yeah. And he even says, "In faith, if you go to hell, I'll not forsake you, by the way." So the fellowship professes even more loyalty. And he says, "Oh, that's wonderful." And so what's the deal? He says, "Okay, let me tell you. I shall show you how it is. I have to go on a journey and before God, and I want you to come with me." And he goes, "Yeah, promise is a duty, but if I take that voyage on me, it should be to my pain. Also, I'm afraid of death. And um, I don't know anybody who wouldn't be." That's what he essentially says. "Your words would fear a strong man." He goes, "But you said if I had need, you would never forsake me, even if I were going to hell." And he goes, "Well, yeah, I said that. But if we took the journey, when would we come back?" "Oh, we can't come back. Never again till the day of doom." And he goes, "Then no, I'm not coming with you." "Who brought you this?" He goes, "Well, death's the one who told me I was here." "What? If death were the messenger, for no man that is living today, I will not go on that journey. Nope, not for my own dad, not for the father that begat me." He goes, "But you promised." And he goes, "Well, I'll eat and drink and make good cheer. I'll be your companion through all the fun stuff, or haunt women, the lusty companion. I wouldn't forsake you with all that. While the day is clear, trust me verily." So in other words, he's a fair weather friend. Well, I'll have fun with you and I'll be by your side through all the good stuff. And he goes, so you'll go and have fun with me for mirth, solace, and play, but you're not going to go with me on my long journey. He goes, "No, no, I'm not going that way. But if you will murder or kill somebody, but I'd help you to do that. Like, I won't die for you and to go with you, but I'll kill for you." And he goes, "What the heck?" And Everman kind of sees through with this friendship. He goes, "Wait a second. Come on, remember me. Remember how much we were friends." And he goes, "Whether you love me or not, I'm not going with you." Now, of course, just the fact that we're asking, think about it this way. If you were a person dying and you were like, "I don't want to go alone. Here, come with me. Why don't you just die so that we can go together?" That's a lot to ask people. It is. And I think anybody at that time would be like, "No, I wouldn't go either." But the fact that he professes so much that, "Oh, I'd kill for you. I do, I'd do anything for you. I go to hell for you." And yet it's very clear that he's not going with him. And fellowship even abandons him. He says, For from thee I will depart as fast as I may, but God speed you on your journey." Like, God bless you, but bye. And he goes, "What? You forsook me?" And he goes, "Yeah, God can have you." And now he's really sad. So Everman's been abandoned. And he goes, "What am I supposed to do now?" And he says, "Okay, who else can I go? You know, in prosperity, men's friends may find, which in adversity be fully unkind." So in other words, most of your friends are going to stick with you in the good times, but they'll forsake you when the stuff gets bad. And that's true. There are friends who will stick with you no matter what. They can't die with you, but they'll be with you at your side until you die. Other people literally like, "I'm not comfortable with that." I've known people who one person gets cancer and the other person divorces them literally because bear to take care of them and watch them slowly die. It's horrible, but people do it. The people are selfish and insensitive at times. And so it's kind of picking up on a lot of that, that idea that you're friends with people when they're fun, but you're not going to be friends with them when they're not. And so then two other characters come in, and they are kindred and cousin. So we're talking all the relatives. Now, whether they say blood is thicker than water, right? So these people should be much more likely to go, okay, Everyman, I'll go with you, right? And they even say, it says, yea, Everyman, and to us declare, if ye be disposed to go any whither, for we'll go, we will live and die together, cousin says. And kindred says, yes, in wealth and woe we will with you hold, for over his kin a man may be bold. So in other words, you can ask a lot of kin because we're family. Family is forever, And so whether good times or bad, kin will stay with you. And he's like, yay, okay, yeah, you're right. Friends, it can be fair weather friends, but family are different. And so let me tell you, and he gets right to it this time. He goes, well, I was commanded by a messenger, and that is a high king's chief officer. Now that's death. Who's the high king? God. And he bade me go on a pilgrimage. And I know well I shall never come again. Also, I must give a reckoning straight. So he's not lying to him. I have a great enemy that hath me in wait, which intended me for to hinder. So that's Satan. So I've got an enemy that's waiting in wait for me, and I could get in trouble. So I need to not go alone. And he goes, well, what account is that which you must render? And he goes, I have to show all of my works, how I have lived and my days spent. He has the day of reckoning. And he says, but if you come for charity to help me, and he goes, well, where are you going? And he goes, no, I don't think so. I'd rather fast on bread and water for 5 years or more than go with you. And everyone's like, but why? For now shall I never be merry if you forsake me. And he goes, no, be merry. Ye be a merry man. Take good heart to you and make no moan. But as one thing I warn you by St. Anne, as for me, you shall go alone. And so cousin and kindred say, oh, family is family, but it's not. And he goes, well, my cousin, will you not with me go? And he goes, no, 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 no. By Our Lady. That's actually Mary, mother of Jesus. That's very common to use that kind of expression. It's actually where bloody comes from. The sort of pseudo curse word, that bloody this and that bloody that. That's by Our Lady. That's why it's a curse word, because it's taking the name of Mary in vain. And he goes, but by Our Lady, I have a cramp in my toe. Trust not to me, for so God me speed, I will deceive you in your most need. So he's saying, oh no, I have a cramp in my toe. But remember, cousins and family will deceive you when it comes to really being asked for stuff. And the kindred is like, nah, we're not. We're gonna leave. I'm gonna go and dance with a lady, and we're gonna go have some fun. But I'll give her leave to help you in that journey if you and she may agree. And he goes, okay. Will you go with me or abide behind? And he goes, abide behind. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And he says, well, see ya. Farewell thee till another day. And everyone's like, what? But I when I am most in, I have most need, they me forsake. I am deceived. That maketh me sad. And so it is. It's kind of it is sad. It's funny-ish, but it's also sad. And so he goes, now I go too. And so then cousin's gone too. And he goes, Jesus is all come here too. In other words, he's now these are not swear words in this case. I mean, he's really pleading with Jesus. Like, is this really what happens? My kinsman promised faithfully to come with me, and yet now they've both fled. Fellowship promised me, and he's gone too. And then he says, wait a second. All my life I have loved wealth. If that my goods will now help me, that would be awesome. And so he says, let me ask. And now, of course, in real life, can a human being talk to wealth. No, no, no. But this is an allegory. And so here's all his wealth, goods. Maybe he looks like, I don't know, Jabba the Hutt or something, this big bag of gold or something he's dressed in. It depends on how it's staged. But here comes worldly goods. And he goes, who called me? Everyman? Um, I lie here in corners, trussed and piled so high, and in chest I am locked so fast, also sacked in bags, that you may see with thine eye I cannot stir. So he's got loads of cash. He is a very wealthy man. Okay. And Everyman says, come here. He says, because I need some counsel. And he goes, okay. He says, if I can help you, I'll help you. And he says, okay, it's not the world that's the problem. I have another disease. And it is not in this world, it is not. I'm sent before the highest Jupiter of all, that's God. And all my life I've had joy and pleasure in thee. So I want you to come with me so that you, before God, can help me in my reckoning, can clean it and purify it. Now, and it even says, it is said ever among that money maketh all right that is wrong. Can money solve every problem? No. And it certainly can't pay for the redemption of somebody's soul. And so he can't just bring a bunch of wealth and buy off God. And that's not going to happen. He goes, nay, Everyman, I sing another song. I follow no man in such voyages. And if I went with you, if you tried to show God all the wealth you had acquired, it would not help you. God would frown upon this, because in so many things you did for the love of me. So instead of thinking about God and doing what was godly, he thought about his wealth and tried to acquire more. So he was after stuff that was not godly. He worshiped the wrong God, if you wanted to think about it that way. And Everyman's like, but come on, let's go together. And he goes, no. He goes, I am too brittle. I may not endure. I will follow no man 1 foot, be you sure. And he goes, but I've loved you and had great pleasure in you. I love treasure, which is so blatant. But who says that? But are there people who are really attached to their stuff? Yeah. And it's not just back then, but even today, people get buried with stuff because there was one guy and he got buried with his car. Like he literally had his car buried with him. And I'm thinking, it's not like you can really take it with you to heaven, people. It's down in the ground. Just because you have a Maserati, but literally it's that level of thinking that Everyman is doing. So it's very simplistic. And it's not what most of us think about, like, oh, I want to take all my worldly goods with me. No, we really don't, but we can't. No matter how rich or poor you are, you can't take any of that with you. And he goes, if I go with you, that is to thy damnation without leasing, without ending. For my love is contrary to the love everlasting. If you love wealth, that's a detriment against loving God. Okay. And if you had been loved moderately, as if you'd given some of the poor some of your wealth, some of me, he even says a part of me, then you would not be in this problem. But you didn't. You kept and hoarded your wealth and made it, counted it and made you feel happy and richer. You didn't give it out to people who were in need. And that would have helped you, because that would have been a good deed, right? And he's like, oh no. He goes, now I'm in trouble. And then the good says, are you actually thinking that I'm yours? And he says, well, I thought so. I had wend so. That just means thought. It's almost like there's a word in Scottish Gaelic, it's ken, and that's like to know, or I thought to know or think something. I'd kenned so. So this is I'd wend so. And I really did think that you were mine, that I owned you, all these worldly goods. And he goes, no, no, nope. For a while I was lent thee, just like your life was lent to you. A season thou hadst me in prosperity, but my condition is man's soul to kill. If I save one person, 1,000 do spill. He goes, and there's no way I'd go with you. And so when you are dead, this is my guise, another to deceive in the same wise. And my wealth will go to somebody else, and they will be deceived too. And he is false good. He's false. He's a bad thing. So this guy actually put so much of his energy into gaining something that wasn't even good. Thou traitor to God that hast deceived me and caught me in thy snare. And he says, you did this willingly. And the goods even says, I must needs laugh. I cannot be sad. Oh, and he's all mad, but I mean, it kind of makes sense though. And goods leaves him. And so now Everyman is like, what am I supposed to do? And he starts going through it again. Fellowship wouldn't go. My kinsman wouldn't go. And now goods just tells me that he takes people to hell and he'd never go with me. And now I'm ashamed and I'm so worthy to be blamed. So there's humility in here. That's good. Thus may I well myself hate. So what am I going to do? And then it says, I think that I shall never speed till that I go to my good deeds. But alas, she is so weak because he hasn't done many good deeds. Remember all that wealth he kept and hoarded instead of giving away. And so she's so weak that she can neither go nor speak. So she's lying on the ground. She can't walk and she can't talk because she's so weak. Yet I will venture on her now. My good deeds, where are you? And she says, here I lie cold in the ground. Thy sins hath me sore bound that I cannot stir. So you've been so sinful and your sins have so overpowered any good deeds you did that I can't even get up off the ground. And he goes, I'm really worried. I must pray counsel for help now should come right well. In other words, I really need some help right now. And she says, I have an understanding that ye be summoned account to make before God, Messiah of Jerusalem King. And it's funny how there are so many different ways that they describe him, the greatest Jupiter, the stuff, but there's no doubt, there's no one in the audience who wouldn't know who they're talking about. And it says, you need to do by me that journey that what you will take. So in other words, listen to me. And he says, I really want you, please, I pray you, will you go with me? And she goes, I would absolutely go with you, but I cannot stand. Truly, I'm so weak. He says, is there anything on you fall? Did something fall on you? And she goes, yeah. If ye had perfectly cheered me, your book of account now ready had been. Look, the book of your works and deeds here. Oh, see how they lie under the feet to your soul's heaviness. In other words, you're stomped on your own book of good deeds. You haven't been doing the things you're supposed to do. And he says, for one letter I cannot see. And essentially he's saying, I haven't done anything. There's nothing. The book is empty. And he's like, please help me, or else I am forever damned. And she says, Everyman, I am sorry for your fall, and fain would I help you if I were able. Well, then give me some counsel. That's what Everyman says. And she goes, okay, I will. Though that on my feet I may not go. I have a sister that shall with you also, called Knowledge, which shall you abide to help you make that dreadful reckoning. And Knowledge comes in, and because he does have knowledge, even if he didn't have a lot of good deeds, he knew what he was supposed to do. And so Knowledge, the sister of good deeds, comes in. You could call it wisdom. That's probably a better word than knowledge, at least translating to our language. Although this is a modern English sort of translation of the early Middle English. But she says, Everyman, I will go with thee and be thy guide, and in thy most need to go by thy side. So knowledge he can take with him. And he says, okay, now I'm all right. And it says, and when he had brought you here, where you shall heal, where thou shalt heal thee of thy smart, then go with your reckoning and your good deeds together. So in other words, he has to essentially learn what he needs. And so what knowledge does is she takes him to confession. He has to confess his sins. Now that's one of the 7 rites that were part of the Catholic Church doctrine. You had to go confess what you've done and be cleansed of your sins. That has to happen. In fact, extreme unction, or the last rites, is performed for Catholic people even today. And that's right at their deathbed, where they give their last confession. So this is really what it is. It's not just regular confession. This is extreme unction. And so he gives that last confession of all the bad things he's done so he can be cleansed of those sins before he dies. Okay. And it's if he dies with his sins unconfessed and cleansed, then he will not go to heaven. The most he can make is purgatory, according to Catholics. So then he goes, oh, okay, good. So let's go. He says, we're going to go together lovingly. So knowledge is actually kind to him. Wisdom, again, is probably closer to us. But he says, let's go to confession, that cleansing river. And he goes, oh, good. I wish we were there already. But I pray you, give me some understanding. Where is the holy man confession? And that confession is a character. And he goes, he's in the house of salvation. Now that's the church. So we shall find him in that place that shall comfort by God's grace. And he goes, lo, this is confession. Kneel down and ask mercy, for he is in good conceit with God Almighty. So in other words, he is a priest representing God. So come and confess all that you've done. And he says, I come with knowledge for my redemption. Repent with hearty and full contrition. So part of it is you confess what you've done. And the other thing is that you do an act of contrition. Sometimes it could be just, repeating verses, or, like our Father who art in heaven, the prayer so many times. It may be that they have to do acts of atonement, but it depends on what their sins happen to be. But he goes, here you go. I have to take in a pilgrimage to God. It's essentially the end of my life. And so please help my good deeds from my piteous exclamation. Please take away my sins so that my poor good deeds can stand up and talk. And he goes, I know your sorrow well, Everyman, because with knowledge you come to me, and I will comfort as well as I can, and a precious jewel I will give thee called penance. So when you confess what you've done, and then they give you stuff to do in atonement or in penance, in the other word, where is it? Contrition, an act of contrition. Any of those things work, but you're supposed to do something essentially to help get over the sin that you've done. And so he says, therewithal, once you do that penance, it's going to void the adversity. It's going to void the sin that you've done. And so you'll receive that scourge of me. Now, the words he uses are really scary. So how do they get, it says, therewith shall your body chastised be. Well, the chastisement is actually, it's a common term that's used for whipping. And so is scourge. In fact, when the plague happened, when it was running through town and everything, all the towns running around the world several times over, a lot of priests would actually self-flagellate. They would whip themselves as some type of atonement to appease God so that the plague wouldn't be so bad. Unfortunately, just drawing that much blood on their backs, from whipping themselves, made them more likely to catch the plague and die. But that was the intent, was though to cleanse their sin, and therefore, God would be nicer to people so that not as many people would die of the plague. But he's saying, he goes, you shall receive that scourge of me. And remember, your Savior was scourged for thee. This is all talking about being like physically punished with sharp scourges, and suffered it patiently. So you So must thou, if thou escape that painful pilgrimage, you have no choice. Okay. But in any wise, be sure of mercy. So if you're willing to be cleansed of all this stuff, God will give you mercy and you'll be okay. Okay. And Everman's like, oh, thank goodness. For now, I will be, my penance begin. And it says what, and then it says, though the knots be painful and within. So, there are times when the hurt will be inside as well as out, because what pain that ever it you to you be, and knowledge shall give you counsel at will, how your accounts you shall make clearly. So he's saying, okay, this is fine. We're gonna now. I don't know that I've ever seen it where he actually got punished on stage or anything like that. So, but the fact that he uses that language is really interesting, because he's actually, that does speak to being whipped. And it's a little scary. That's always been a little troublesome for me with this text. But anyway, so now he prays to God, O eternal God, O heavenly figure. And he goes on, but he's essentially, because he would every man redeem who was created sinful because of Adam. Forgive me for my grievous offense. Here I cry thee mercy in this presence. And then he keeps calling on God. He's praying to God. Though I be a sinner most abominable, yet let my name be written in Moses' table. In other words, let me go to heaven, please. Save me from the power of my enemy, that's Satan, for death assaileth me strongly. And lady, that's Mary, that I may, by means of your prayer, that's what it means, it's not they prayer, of your son's glory to be partaker, by means of his passion, I crave. So again, that's actually his execution. This is when he was put on the cross. His crucifixion is what the passion is referring to. I beseech you, help my soul to save. And then knowledge, give me the scourge of penance. My flesh therewith shall give a quittance. And this is, again, referring to whipping. I will now begin if God give me grace. Now you'll notice there are no real stage directions. It doesn't say, oh, and then this person walks off, and then this person does this, and then this person is whipped and stuff like that. And he says, my body sore punished shall be. Take this body for the sin of the flesh, and thou delightest to go gay and fresh. That means happy and fresh. And in the way of damnation, thou didst me brine, therefore suffer now strokes and punishing. So again, it's really saying that's what he get. Now, I've never seen it staged. Like I said, I've never seen it staged so that he's whipped during this. And I have not seen the end of that play, so I'm not sure if they show it. The one that I'm giving you you have the other recording of. So I've only seen it not staged like that, where it's like either it happens off stage or it's all figurative, but they don't actually show like whip, 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 whip. But somehow it happens. And good deed says, I thank God I can now walk and go. And I'm delivered of my sickness and woe. And then I'm going to go with good deeds. Yay. And knowledge says, yay, your good deeds cometh now. And your good deeds are whole and sound because the sin has been erased. Okay. Now I know this is a little odd. If any of you guys are Protestant, you're like, what the? Or if you're not religious, all of this might be a little new, but this is very much based on Catholic teaching. So, and Catholic teaching at that time. So Everyman's like, yay, now I hear your voice. I weep for very sweetness of love. And knowledge is like, yay, let's be happy. Okay, yeah, sure. The garment's wet with your tears. And it's good to wear that garment. Put on his garment to thy behove, which is wet with your tears, or else before God you may it miss when your journey's end come shall. And he says, what is this? And he goes, it's a garment of sorrow. From pain it will you borrow. Contrition it is that getteth forgiveness. It pleaseth God passing well. And so he's wearing essentially a garment of contrition covered with his tears. And he goes, well, are you going to wear it so you can heal? And he goes, yes, absolutely. And so let's go. Now, good deeds. It says you must you lead with thee 3 persons of great might. So good deed says, okay, we have to take 3 persons of great might. And he goes, who should they be? And he goes, discretion and strength they hide, and thy beauty may not abide behind. And you must call to mind your 5 wits as your counselors. You must have them ready at all hours. And the 5 wits are the 5 senses. And so he's taking discretion, strength, my 5 wits, and beauty. But now they're not going to stay with him, because he loses his wits, he loses all sensation when he dies. So they don't go in the grave with him, okay? But they go with him up until that point, okay? And strength is going to bring him hither, and then discretion is going to go with him too. And so he's not alone. He has strength, discretion, beauty, and the 5 wits, and his good deeds, and knowledge. And so he's got plenty of people to go with him up to that point. Okay. And they all say, and the 5 wits, and though it were through the world round, we will not depart for sweet nor sour until, and this is, they don't say it, but until the very end, because he can't take them into the grave even then. Okay. And it says, in alms half good I will give with my hands twain in the way of charity with good intent, and the other half still shall remain in quiet to be returned where it ought to be. So in other words, he's giving away, in his will, he's giving away half of his gold to charity, and the other half is quietly returned where it ought to be. And so that's to get rid of all of Satan's influence because of all those worldly goods and the greed and stuff like that he had expressed. And so now you have to go to the priest and receive holy sacrament and ointment together, and then we'll wait for you. Okay. And so, and then the 5 wits kind of, at this point, they're kind of going through the motions as a ritual. Okay. And the 5 wits even say, all you can do is prepare as much as possible, and do the things that you should do to get ready, essentially to be consecrated and to go up to heaven. Okay. So, they kind of explain what's going to happen with the priest. And then, knowledge actually talks about Jesus. Remember, he's the one reason that people have salvation. He sold his own life essentially for us. And then they talk about Saint Peter, the apostle, does say that Jesus's curse hath all they which God their Savior do buy or sell. So we can't. That's why he offered death at the beginning. I'll give you 1,000 pounds and you'll let me go, right? And the guy's like, no, I don't care for any of that stuff. You can't buy that. You remember, rich people die just like old people die. I mean, poor people die. And so all of this stuff you need to be freed of. And so, and he even says with all the people, like, remember, sinful, and they talk bad about, there are some priests who are holy and who really do God's work, but then there are other sinful priests that give sinners a bad example. Their children sitteth by other men's fires, I've heard. In other words, they get children who essentially they cuckold other men who are married. They sleep with other people's wives. And some haunteth women's company. They go and have hookers and stuff, or prostitutes, or they live an unclean life, or they're, lecherous or lustful. And so they're bad. So don't trust any bad priests. Just go to the good one. Okay. How you tell a difference, they don't say, but then it says, for yonder I see every man come, and he seems okay. And every man is coming back, and he says, it says, I have received the sacrament for my redemption, and then mine extreme unction. That's what I was talking about, the last rites, where he is cleansed of his sins and gets the last. There's actually a prayer that goes with it where the soul is going on to heaven. And it says, blessed be all that they counsel me to take it. Supposedly, if you didn't do extreme unction, then your soul would go to purgatory. That's according to Catholic teaching at the time. So you have to get that extreme unction. You need a priest to come and perform last rites so that your soul can go be cleansed right at that moment that it dies. And so he says, okay, now I'm going to go. God be our guide. And Strength says, we're going to stay with you till ye have done this voyage long. And so they all stay with them. But then Everyman says, alas, I am so faint, I may not stand. My limbs under me do fold. So he thinks he's going on this great journey, but really he's dying. So he's had extreme unction. And he goes, friends, let us not turn again to this land, not for all the world's gold, for unto this cave must I creep. Now, at this point, at least in most of the staging, the versions I've seen, like a trap door or some type of opening, or it could be stairs right in the front of the stage or something, but there's some place down below him. He's looking down in it, and it's like, oh no, into this cave must I creep and turn to the earth and there to sleep. This is his grave. Now, could you make it an actual cave where he's going to be like walk into the cave and we understand that? No, but if you make a hole in the floor, like a big rectangular hole in the floor, everybody's going to know exactly what he's looking at. And so if you're staging it, that's how I would stage it anyway. And that's how I've seen it. I like it that way because I mean, it looks a little scary, but it's still. But at that point, he goes, no, I need to go in there. And he points down to the grave. Into this grave must I creep and turn to the earth and there to sleep. And she goes, what? Into that grave? This is beauty. Alas. And then Everyman says, yeah, there shall you consume more and less. And she goes, but what? Should I smother here? And he goes, it's okay, but in this world live no more we shall, but in heaven before the highest Lord of all. And she goes, no. Adieu by St. John, I take my cap in my lap and I am gone. Beauty will leave him. Because remember, your body, is it going to stay pretty? Nope. It goes in the grave and then it gets all icky and the worms eat it. So no, you don't get to keep beauty. And she goes, peace, I am deaf. I look not behind me, not, and thou would give me all the gold in thy chest. So in other words, no, I'm not going in the grave with you. And he goes, but you said you'd go. She promised with me to live and die. And Strength says, I'm not going either. Because remember, you die and you don't have any strength left because your body's dead, right? And he goes, come on, Strength. He goes, nope, I have to leave too. And he said, but you'd always stay. And he goes, I said I'd stay on the journey, but now I repent me that I came. And he goes, but are you going to break your promise? And he goes, it doesn't make any difference because he can't keep his strength even. Now, Strength was willing to go with him until that point. And then he's got to die. And you can't keep your beauty and you can't keep your strength. Well, even if you get old, though, think about this. Do you keep your beauty? I mean, that physical, young youthfulness? No. I mean, you can do plastic surgery, but you're not going to stay young forever. And you're not going to keep your strength forever. You can't. That's why football players are not 96 years old. They stop playing football at a certain point because they physically can't do what they used to do. And it says, discretion says, every man, I will after strength be gone. As for me, I will leave you alone. Because his wits, even the five wits, the five senses, his discretion, his brain, all of this thinking is all gone because his life is over. And so his discretion is leaving. And so are his wits. He won't be able to see, hear, taste, touch, or smell anymore because he's dead. And Everyman is like, oh no, what am I going to do? I'm all alone again. And Good Deeds is like, nope, I will abide with thee. I will not forsake thee indeed. I will go with, and Good Deeds actually goes in to the grave with Everyman. And he says, he goes, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was now I may my true friends see, I loved them better than my good deeds alone. Knowledge will ye forsake me also. And she says, yeah, when ye to death do go, but not because of the danger. It's just because your brain dies. And it says, I'm not going to leave until I see where ye shall become. And he goes, okay, then I must be gone to make my reckoning and my debts pay. For I see my time is nigh spent away. And then he looks at the audience. This is crucial. He says, take example, all ye that do hear or see, how they that I love best do forsake me, except my good deeds that biteth truly. And so he's saying, everybody pay attention, because the only thing you get to take with you are the good things you've done in your life. That's all. And everything else is up to God and his mercy and Mother and May. That's Holy Mary, Mary, Mother of Jesus. And then good deed says, fear not, I will speak for thee. And so she says, let's go. Let us go and never come again. And he prays to God one more time. He says, please save me from Satan. And hopefully I can get to heaven. And he says, and knowledge says, and it says, commendo spiritum meum. Now, most people have known this. And remember, at this time, I can't even say remember, because you might not know this. At this time, the only Bible that is in existence, besides the Greek Orthodox Church, the only Bible that is used at this time is in Latin. It was illegal. It was unlawful. It was actually against church law to translate the Bible into your own language. So if you could translate Latin into English or to German or to French or to any of the languages used at that time, Spanish and Italian, it was against the law. Like the church would find you and they would destroy your translation, and they would, if you did it again, they'd execute you, like literally. So nobody read the Bible because they couldn't read, but even if they couldn't read Latin unless they were clergy. And so when he says commendo spiritum meum, that just means commend my spirit to your service, to you. And he's speaking to God. But they would recognize that, and it says in manos tuas, that's in your hands. So they would recognize that as a refrain that would be used in church. And yet most Latin they wouldn't even recognize. So, it was a very strange time when the majority of the population would go to a church service and it would be in Latin, and they don't really know Latin and they don't read the Bible because it's in Latin. And so so much of like what we do today when we read religious texts in translation, that didn't happen back then. And it's hard. I just wanted to explain that so you guys knew. But then knowledge says, he hath suffered. Why it's not capped, I'm not sure, but God suffered so that we can endure. And then here's good deeds going. And here comes an angel. Come, excellent elect spouse to Jesu. Here above thou shalt go because of thy singular virtue. Now the soul is taken from the body. Their reckoning is crystal clear, and you're going to heaven. And then he goes. He actually walks down into the grave. In most versions I've seen. But then the angel's there to go, but he's going to heaven. His body and soul will split, and then the soul is going to go to heaven. So yay. And then a doctor comes out and he says, okay, y'all, pay attention. You saw what happened. Ye hearers, those who are watching this play, take it of worth, old and young, forsake pride, remember beauty, the five wits, strength, and discretion. Even they will forsake you. The only thing you can take with you is good deeds. But beware. If they're too small, if you don't have any good deeds before God, if they're not going to be any helpful at all. So do good things, have mercy and pity, and make sure that you understand every single day, I guess. Keep in mind, God is going to have, God's going to essentially tell you whether or not you're going to go to heaven. It says, ite maledicti in ignem aeternum. So in other words, if you're bad, you're going to go to hell for eternity. And if you're good, then high in heaven you'll be crowned and you'll live as God. So there it is. That's it. I mean, essentially, they're stating their case pretty clearly. Hey, this is what happens to every man, and then they go through it so clearly with all the different things. And these are actually people, who represent beauty and knowledge and confession and strength and every man. God again would probably not be shown like he wasn't in the video that I. There are other videos too if you want to look at a different one if that one doesn't float your boat. But just let me know if you have questions once you watch this, okay? And I will talk to y'all later. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. See ya.